I said, something's wrong here, something's really wrong, can't have happened, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And I'll fight with you, I'll fight next to you, I'll keep going. I love you all for just having the balls to come here. I'll fight with you.
As you may have guessed, this will be a video about the recent attack on Capitol, incited by some important media figures, especially by Donald Trump. This video is an attempt to look at this attack from a social psychological lens and to, possibly, provide some clarity as to the reasons and root causes of this event. There are two disclaimers needed. First, this is not an attempt to fully explain what happened. It is impossible to explain such a complicated and complex phenomenon with only one discipline or one part of a discipline, as is social psychology. So, I will try to tackle this from a social psychological standpoint, not trying to imply that this is all that mattered or happened. Of course, there are individual and biological variables that should and do account for some of what happened. But I do believe that it is important to look at it from a social psychological point of view, and not just from an individual one. All complex events require multiple levels of analysis and explanation, and in my opinion, social psychology is one of those levels. So I aim to help you understand this from that point of view. The second disclaimer consists of saying that in this video, people won't be called stupid or demonized or called crazy, as that is usually not very informative. After these disclaimers, I hope you enjoy this video as I deconstruct some of the variables that contributed to these events, while hopefully teaching you something about social psychology. This is the psychology of everything. First, we need to understand that one of the core concepts in social psychology relates to the belonging to groups, us versus them. It is much easier to attack, it is much easier to derogate people who do not belong to our group, and it's easier to feel better about ourselves when we do belong to a group that we believe is good and competent. So, watch this.
Just remember this, you're stronger, you're smarter, you've got more going than anybody, and they try and demean everybody having to do with us, and you're the real people, you're the people that built this nation. You're not the people that tore down our nation.
Social psychology has long known that group membership drives, let's say, not great behavior. One important person that talked about this was called Tajfeld, and he showed that even when groups that we belong to don't really matter, that we value them more and we have behaviors that benefit them even if they don't benefit ourselves. Tajfeld did an experiment where he allocated people to groups by simply saying that you like this painting and the group that you're in also likes this painting, while the other people don't like that painting. While this is completely irrelevant for anyone's life, what he saw when he asked people to allocate resources was that people tended to allocate resources more to their own group instead of the other one, just because people liked a painting more. So belonging to a group is one of the central aspects of our psychology, and we value the people that we identify with. Another important thing to consider in this situation is something called confirmation bias. This refers to the tendency that people have to seek out information that supports their previous beliefs. So, if you believe something, you probably look for information that supports that. Additionally, people tend to scrutinize information that contradicts what they previously thought more than things that they already believe in. Now, considering our world of social media where people can just choose what to see, people see different information. Admittedly, the research on confirmation bias is not very encouraging. Take, for example, some authors that showed the exact same information to people holding opposite beliefs. Well, what did you think happened? Instead of converging on the same opinion, what it did was making their opinions even more extreme. And that's how you lose faith in the future of humanity. Well, I'm not just saying this to make you sad. Consider what I said before about group belonging and tie it to specific beliefs that that group shares. And now, listen to this.
Well, we didn't go to 66, we went to 75 million, and they say we lost, we didn't lose. And by the way, does anybody believe that Joe had 80 million votes? Does anybody believe that?
I'm convinced that in today's environment and for this specific event, that confirmation bias played a role. I'm sure some people that were there shared some sort of beliefs that weren't exactly accurate and shared by other groups. So also take confirmation bias in mind when thinking about this. Social psychology studies the importance of context in how people think and how they act. And one of the earliest studies in social psychology that paved the field came to us from Milgram. And basically what Milgram did was he decided to study obedience derived from him trying to make sense of the events of Second World War and how normal people did appalling things. For him, the answer lied in obedience and authority. So he made a study where people had to give shocks to other people if that person gave the wrong answer to a specific question. And well, let me just show you a clip.
Sharp. Axe, needle, stick, blade. Answer, please. Wrong. I'm up to 180 volts.
Please continue, teacher.
Needle, you're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
For me, one of the most important parts of this study concerns responsibility. So, one of the ways that obedience and authority helps disinhibit behavior is by taking away your personal responsibility of it, as was the case with this subject, which was reticent to continue until this happened.
I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
The authority figure took responsibility for his actions, which in turn helped disinhibit his behavior. Now, imagine that that authority figure is the most powerful person in the world. That person is the President of the United States, and that the President of the United States tells you that he's going to be right there by your side. Do you feel less responsibility for your actions? Do you feel protected?
After this,
You probably do.
we're going to walk down and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down and I'll be there with you.
However, responsibility and diffusion of responsibility is also something that happens because of groups. Maybe you've heard of Kitty Genovese's story where she supposedly was killed in the middle of the night while there were 38 witnesses that didn't call the police and basically did nothing. Although that version of the story is somewhat contested, that story inspired some social psychological theories that do hold up. One of the most robust effects in social psychology is called the bystander effect and the diffusion of responsibility. So basically what this means is that the more people there are, the less likely it is that you want to act differently from them. So in large crowds, such as this one, it's hard not to be immersed on the situation. It's hard to go against the current. It's easy for you to follow the inertia of the group. It's easier to keep moving forward than to simply turn around and go away. By now, you should know there are contextual forces that influence us more than we like to admit. From groupal belonging to obedience and authority, social psychology can teach us a lot about why we do what we do. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, every phenomenon has multiple causes, and this was not an attempt to fully identify all of them. Indeed, social psychology has at least one flaw. that it is better at predicting the behavior of large numbers of people than individuals. Because of this, it might have seemed that I attributed the causes of the attack only to the social level of the event and not to the individual one. While it is true that I did that, due to the constraints of the field itself, it would be rather stupid to deny the existence of individual variables and influences. Each person reacts to the environment in a different way, and everyone has a degree of responsibility. Everyone involved, from the most vile perpetrators to the ones who were just having fun, is responsible for their actions. Although external influences existed, it is necessary to understand also why some people were there and some were not. I will leave that answer to someone else. So now you know some of the forces that influence you at a social level. It would be very easy to dismiss them and to say that you are not influenced by them. In fact, that is a common response. So if I can ask you just one thing, is to be attentive to these forces in your daily life. We all feel we belong to groups and derogate others, whether this is on the basis of political affiliation, country, race, or a million different things. Additionally, we all select information that suits us and run the risk of isolating ourselves from more accurate depictions of reality. We all obey and change our behavior given the presence of authority figures. These are not things that affect only Republicans, Democrats, or independents. These affect all of us and all of you.
If in this study an anonymous experimenter could successfully command adults to subdue a 50-year-old man and force on him painful electric shocks against his protests, one can only wonder what government, with its vastly greater authority and prestige, can command of its subjects.
Hey there, if you liked this video, you might also like this one where I talk about memory and what a memory actually is. I warn you that this video isn't that good because it was my first video on YouTube, so if you just want to see how bad it was, you can also click it. Take care.